Today, we're going to break down one of the most methodical and, frankly, ambitious space programs of this century. We're going to dig into the strategy, the tech, and the pure ambition behind China's systematic journey back to the moon. So, picture this. For 44 years, silence. After the Soviet Union's Luna 24 mission way back in 1976, not a single fresh gram of lunar rock made its way back to Earth. An entire generation grew up without us ever seeing a successful lunar sample return mission. Well, that long silence was absolutely shattered in December of 2020. China's Chang'e E5 mission, this was a complex robotic ballet performed almost 500,000 kilometers away. It successfully came back with 1,731 grams of new lunar soil and rock. It really did open a whole new chapter in lunar science.
But here's the key thing to understand. This wasn't just some one-off success story. Nope. The Chang'e 5 mission was the result of a super systematic, long-term blueprint for exploring the moon, a plan that had been meticulously put into action for nearly 2 decades. It was all part of the plan.
And that plan, it has a name, the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program, or CLEP. It was formally set up way back in 2004, and it was designed with this really clear step-by-step logic, making sure every single mission built the foundation for whatever came next. So this 4-phase structure is absolutely crucial. First, you orbit the moon and you map the whole terrain. Makes sense, right? Second, you learn how to land safely and then, explore the surface with a rover. Third, you bring pieces of the moon back home to study. And finally, you take all that knowledge you've gained and you use it to establish a long-term presence. It's just an incredibly patient and logical way to do it.
And who's making all this happen? Well, it's basically a 3-part system. You've got the CNSA, that's the China National Space Administration, and they act as the architect. They set the big picture policy. Then you have CASC, the main state-owned contractor. They're the builders, the ones actually making the rockets and the spacecraft. And finally, you have the Chinese Academy of Sciences, or CAS. They are the scientists, defining the research goals and analyzing all that precious data.
Okay, so you've got the blueprint, you've got the team in place. So how did they actually put it all into action? Let's walk through the missions and see how this all builds up, starting with Phase 1.
Phase 1 was all about getting the lay of the land from way up in orbit. Back in 2007, Chang'e 1 was the pioneer, creating the first really comprehensive 3D maps of the moon. Then, just 3 years later, Chang'e 2 followed up, producing even higher-res maps to scout out future landing sites. But it didn't stop there. It then flew out to a Lagrange point and even visited an asteroid. It was really pushing the envelope on deep space tracking and control.
Then came Phase 2, landing. In 2013, the Chang'e 3 mission pulled off the first soft landing on the moon in 37 years. It successfully deployed the U-2, or Jade Rabbit rover, proving that China could not only get to the moon but could actually operate on its surface.
But they didn't just stop there. In 2019, the Chang'e 4 mission did something no other country had ever done. It landed on the far side of the moon. This was a monumental leap, something the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission called a technological achievement no other country has accomplished. It really proved that China could operate in the most challenging lunar environment you can imagine.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the sheer complexity of Phase 3. Look, Chang'e 5 wasn't just a simple lander, it was like 4 spacecraft in one. It had to land, automatically drill and scoop up samples, launch a tiny ascent vehicle back into lunar orbit, and then, get this, perform the world's first fully robotic rendezvous and docking in orbit around another world before it could even head home. Just an incredibly ambitious sequence of events. And the scientific payoff from that mission was immense. You see, the Apollo samples, as foundational as they were, they're all really, really old. But the Chang'e 5 samples were specifically grabbed from a much younger volcanic region. At around 2 billion years old, they proved that volcanic activity on the moon kept going for nearly 1 billion years longer than scientists had thought, completely rewriting a fundamental chapter of the moon's history.
But pulling off these increasingly complex missions, especially landing on the far side, that required a whole new set of tools. China basically had to build a technological bridge to communicate with a place that's permanently hidden from us here on Earth.
And that's the fundamental problem, right? The moon itself is this giant radio shield. When you're on the far side, you just can't talk directly to Earth. So, how in the world do you solve that?
Well, China's solution was both poetic and brilliant. The Ke-Kiao, or Magpie Bridge relay satellites. They're named after this beautiful Chinese myth, And these spacecraft do exactly what that name implies. They form a communications bridge over the moon, connecting that hidden far side to the controllers all the way back here on Earth.
And this wasn't a one-and-done kind of solution. Qichao-1 was launched back in 2018 specifically to make that historic Chang'e 4 landing possible. But just this year, in 2024, the much more powerful Qichao-2 was launched. It's got better coverage, especially of the lunar South Pole, and it's designed to be the communications backbone for the entire next decade of exploration, eventually even forming a full constellation.
And all of that brings us to the final and, by far, the most ambitious phase of the program, moving on from just visiting the moon to actually staying there.
Believe it or not, Phase 4 is already underway, with a trio of precursor missions that are paving the way for a permanent base. Chang'e 6 is going to attempt the first-ever sample return from the far side. Then, Chang'e 7 will do a full survey of the South Pole's resources. And finally, Chang'e 8 will test the actual technologies you'd need to live off the land, like 3D printing with moon dust.
All of these missions are the building blocks for this, the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS. The vision here is a robotic and eventually crewed scientific outpost at the lunar South Pole, designed for long-term exploration and resource development.
And the timeline for this? It's pretty clear. China has stated its official goal is to land its first taikonauts on the moon by 2030. This would be the ultimate culmination of this entire step-by-step robotic program and really the beginning of a continuous human presence on another world. So, after all this effort, what's the ultimate goal? I mean, why does the moon matter so much? Well, it really comes down to two big things: science and strategy. Scientifically, the payoff is already here. The program has filled a billion-year gap in our understanding of the moon. It's discovered a brand new lunar mineral they named Chang'e Y, and it's starting to unlock the secrets of that mysterious far side. And looking forward, it's all about prospecting for resources like water ice, which could one day fuel the future exploration of our solar system. And the global scientific importance of this work is really undeniable. After the Chang'e 5 success, NASA's own head of science at the time, Thomas Zurbuchen, sent this message, highlighting how these new samples really benefit all of humanity in our quest to understand our little corner of the cosmos. So, from its patient four-phase blueprint to a very tangible presence on the lunar surface, China's program has really fundamentally transformed the landscape of space exploration. We are now, without a doubt, in a new era of returning to the moon. And as this meticulous plan continues to unfold, it leaves us with a pretty compelling question for the future.